Well, welcome everyone to East End Books P-Town on our traveling tour this summer, and we're happy to be back at the Provincetown Public Library again, and we're grateful that they were able to have us here on this very sunny, kind of warm and windy day today, but it's a lovely day. Everybody's getting ready for one of the biggest weeks of the year, which is Bear Week, which is just about to begin. And so, upcoming events, a few upcoming events and announcements. We're here again tomorrow night for the book Murder in Hollywood. This is a story, an untold story of Tinseltown murder with Lana Turner. And that's going to be Casey Sherman. This book is already going to be made into a movie. And he will be in conversation with Fermin Rojas, producer Fermin Rojas. Some of you might have seen in this recent film festival one of his new movies. There was a beautiful long short film about Urvashi Vaughn, who did so much for so long in this country. And then, so we always typically get asked at this point, you know, what's almost out of tickets that you need to get your act together quicker on, and that would be the Hebridean Baker event on the 17th next week at the Provincetown Art Society. Tickets are almost gone, so get your ticket there. That's an event that's not only the stories, but there's an open bar and food inspired by new Scottish cuisine, and of course Cognac will be there again in his kilt. He's flown in from Scotland. It's a lot of fun. It's the third year in a row, so get your ticket there. And then the others that are just rapidly going are July 26th, the Brad Gooch event with Ken Falk. With the new Keith Haring book, which is amazing. There's two events, our event at the Davis space of the WMR radio upstairs, a regular event like this, and then downstairs will be a dinner honoring them, and it will benefit 20 Summers. So that's a separate event, and on our website you can see the tickets for that. But you don't have to go to both, or you can go to both. And then two other ones that are going quickly. August 8th, at the Mary Heaton Forest Provincetown Art Society, Doris Kearns Goodwin in conversation with Ken Falk and Kevin Sessoms. And that will also be a dinner benefiting Provincetown Art Society. And finally, the one that's even later in August, that's going quick, is August 23rd. That is Michael Cunningham in conversation with Ben Shattuck, with a certain actress we love in the audience. She'll be having her new book out and her new comedy show going in the fall. So we hope that'll be at the Fine Arts Work Center. Everything else is on our website. Check that out. And I will say I'm excited too about on July 22nd we have Jamie Brenner back, our friend who's best-selling author. A new book, A Novel Summer, which is set in Provincetown, and it was also going to be made into a movie, so we're excited about that. So we'll hopefully see you there. So Wonderland, we will have, until they run out, we will have signed copies. I'm going to, hopefully Nicole will come with me a few blocks to the bookstore to sign more copies, take some pictures there. So we will have signed copies available. If you buy on the website while the live stream is going on, and put in the memo section who you want it to be autographed to, I'll check before she goes, the website orders, and we will do that. We'll get that personalized copy. Otherwise, it'll be a signed copy from Nicole, and that'll be available. And then I'm hoping that I'll also have some signed copies available at our store in Boston as well. But if not, I can bring them back and forth because I'm going on the ferry every week, so don't worry about it. So we're very excited to have Nicole here. I was thrilled to meet Nicole at the NEBA Regional Book Conference and was captivated by her talk there and getting to meet her. And people were very excited. And so she's, I think, has been going, I heard from somebody else 5 days in a row now or something. And it's 4 days, yeah. So it's very exciting to see her here. So Nicole Treska is the author of the debut memoir, Wonderland. Her short fiction has appeared in New York Tyrant Magazine, Epiphany Literary Journal, and Egress, New Openings in Literary Art. Her interviews and reviews are up at Electric Literature, Granica, The Millions, Bomb, and The Rumpus. I love The Rumpus. I love all of them, but I love The Rumpus as well. And we're very excited. This is an incredible book. You will not be able to put it down. I got the advanced review copy, and I couldn't stop. And it's one of those things where you're kind of like you should sleep at some point. It's that good, it's that well written. And I'm excited to say that we have a special guest here. I'm just going to say that she's a special agent, and that's all I'm going to say. She'll be in conversation with, and I'll let Nicole introduce and give you the full background of this very special guest. And without further ado, I invite you to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doesn't she look fabulous? I mean,
It's
this
all stuff
outfit
for
is
you
so
guys.
amazing. It is really ready for the Marc Jacobs reading room.
Yeah, I
as
didn't
you
know
can
it was
see.
going to be this good, but I feel good about it. So this is my wonderful special agent, Agent Annie DeWitt.
Yeah.
My agent
We
at the
just-
shipment agency. No, I'm going to
Leave
do
it at that.
She is the author of White Nights in
Split Town
City.
City.
Okay, Split Town City.
But
And
basically, all we need to know is that
You're like,
my one bio line at this point is I am Nicole Treska's agent.
She's
period.
yeah, and we're going to do some stuff.
You want to read a little to
Yeah, I
start?
will. I will read to
Okay,
start.
great.
I'm going to read from the prologue tonight,
Ooh.
which I have not read
That's
from.
exciting, because this came along sort of late into the process, right? The prologue.
The prologue was the last thing that I wrote, and it was a kind of a last minute assignment for my editor to thematically tie the book together, and it helped me to put a lot of the research that I had done for Wonderland into the book in a really purposeful way. So it was a great little ask, I think, at the end. So I love it, and I'm going to read from it. Which is here. How do you turn the province of drunks, sailors, and hookers into a dream of bright escape? You build Wonderland, one of America's first amusement parks, located on the water right outside of Boston. Wonderland only operated for a few bright seasons, from 1906 to 1910, but its legacy shines on. Wonderland was built just off Revere Beach, a long, rough crescent of soft sand where over a century of Bostonians, including my entire family, escaped the broiling New England heat. So hot. Developers tried and failed to make a go of the Revere waterfront for years before the park was built. The beach was accessible, served by a narrow gauge railroad, but it was also known for its criminal element. At the beginning of the 20th century, amusement parks were built in resort towns and on boardwalks all over the East Coast, so Revere got another shot. Wonderland was built over a marsh bought cheap with rides and designs borrowed from the Chicago's World Fair, St. Louis Expo, and Brooklyn's Dreamland Amusement Park in Coney Island. And while compound financial disasters would close Wonderland's gates after only 5 seasons, its opening day saw 100,000 residents arrive by railroad in their Sunday best. Working-class Bostonians from the West End strolled alongside Jamesian Back Bay elites. The entrance on Walnut Avenue shone with 30,000 lights, under which the patrons passed into the promenade. The electric lights at Wonderland were as big a sell as any of the attractions, and the park capitalized on their dazzle. The parades and entrances lit up the North Shore. An elevated boardwalks circled a central canal where Shoot the Chutes, an early version of a log ride, sent thrilled patrons in skiffs skidding out across the water. Wonderland chutes were the biggest in the world, brought to Revere direct from the St. Louis Expo. The scenic railway followed the park's perimeter, carrying Bostonians far above the silted band between the firmament of East Boston and the Broad Sound. Next to Shoot the Chutes, an infant incubator pavilion advertised living infants. Steel boxes sat in clean lines, and a pipe along the ceiling delivered oxygen to each incubator. The babies inside were visible, behind glass doors and monitored by visitors and a full medical staff. Other amusement parks across the country featured infant incubators as well. Premature babies weren't given great odds at survival, and Dr. Martin A. Cooney wanted to show people that with warmth, protection, and clean air to breathe, these newborns could survive their circumstances. A safe space for babies was a radical new idea. Many of the park's larger attractions were meant to reveal the far-off world to Bostonians and bring it closer. Shows like Pawnee's Great Wild West, The Japanese Village, and The South Before the War were enormous productions built on lots that housed hundreds of performers and elaborate sets. They were also built on flagrant stereotypes and exploitation. They were criticized even at the time. In between lots, there were sideshows, fun houses, pageants, and talent shows to stoke the wonder of anyone with 5 cents to spare. Some of Wonderland's rides and attraction must have been cathartic to witness. Fighting the Flames was a headline attraction where the facade of a town square burned every night. Guests packed an amphitheater and watched the drama unfold. The townspeople on stage swept sidewalks and bought vegetables. They were unaware of the curling smoke that the audience witnessed. The crowd celebrated as heroic off-duty firefighters arrived to extinguish the all-engulfing flames. No one died when the square burned. No one was ruined. No one's business or home disappeared just like that. It was a roaring good time, a simulated disaster, a controlled burn. Bostonians knew fire and flames. Less than 40 years before, the Great Boston Fire of 1872 rolled across the city, burning the most beautiful blocks you'd never see. The whole of the financial district, the entire downtown. Sketches of the aftermath show a city of rubble, ruins, something ancient and gone forever. The Cyclone roller coaster, built along Revere Beach in 1925, burned down in 1969. My mom, my dad, my entire family still talk about the roller coaster that existed for them, but never for me. Under the Sea joined Wonderland after its first season and featured an enormous tank where Houdini knockoffs broke free of their complicated bindings and swam for freedom and fresh air. Mm-hmm. Divers in heavy suits walked underwater under enormous pressure. Women in mermaid suits looped the depths of the tank, their long hair haloed toward the surface. The newspapers called the performers human fish. In 1919, almost a decade after Wonderland closed, a 50-foot tank of molasses exploded on Commercial Street in Boston's North End. A faulty, overfull tank with bad rivets burst on a warm January afternoon, and 2 million gallons of molasses flooded the streets in a 35-mile-per-hour, 15-foot wave. Shrapnel from the tank tore through the steel beams of buildings. The heavy molasses, under pressure, flowed like water. Its viscous mass destroyed the neighborhood, killing some on impact and suffocating others in its dark amber. The North End smelled sweet for years. Wonderland's descent to Hellgate spiraled riders through Dantean circles of hell in a boat before dropping them precipitously into the underworld, where they met the devil on his throne before they could meet daylight again. My family circled around and around, though daylight often eluded us. For instance, the Boston Globe detailed my father's arrest for federal drug trafficking in 1985. He walked into work at the post office and was tackled by federal agents in a sting operation, a real sticky situation. We saw him out on bail before he went to prison for 2 years. When he got out, I was 7, and my youngest sister, Lindsay, was 4. She didn't remember him. My family met the devil regularly. Finally, there was Love's Journey. The ride was advertised as crazy, sentimental, and sensational. It promised a revolutionary experience that spun lovers in suspended rotation through the various stages of romance. There were children dressed as cherubs, heart-shaped carts, and a confusion of confetti dumped on the rider's head. And this roving search for love felt familiar too. Aren't we all out searching for love? I'll stop there. You're such a good hype lady. Thank you, Annie.
I love it.
Try to
There's
get
also
these
an
shoes in.
echo At the end of the book. Yeah, let's get the shoes.
Have to
They're
get
the
this.
boots, they're really, really great. Thanks,
and
Jeff.
and there's a great echo with that at the end of the book, which I won't spoil for people who haven't read it, but I was rereading the end and sort of prepping on my ride up here, and Jerome can attest, I was like crying. It's so beautiful. I will say it ends in a Dunkin' Donuts, so my sister actually texted me from the Netherlands when she first read it, and she was like, OMG, it ends in a Dunkin' Donuts. And I was like, yes, babe, we were born in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Of course, it started in a Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, not the book actually,
Yes.
but it all started in a Dunkin' Donuts.
So I wanted to start with a little bit of a craft-based question. So for those of you that don't know, Nicole got this really incredible blurb on the back from this man named Gordon Lish, who is notorious for never giving out blurbs to all of the sort of many fabled famous authors that he's both edited over the years. So Lish edited Raymond Carver for The New Yorker. He was Amy Hempel's editor for a long time at, what was it, Simon & Schuster when she was there. So he's worked with this sort of, litany of really influential, great American writers. And we were so delighted to get a two-word blurb from him that literally says at the top, "Straight talk."
I will say it's actually 2 words and a very
And an
explicitly
exclamation
placed
point.
exclamation point. He made sure that there was an exclamation point.
So Nicole, who is so wonderfully humbled, would probably never tell you, but she is also a student of Gordon Lish. She studied with him at the Center for Fiction in New York City and was one of his beloved pupils. And I wondered if you might talk a little bit about, so as you can all probably hear from Nicole's reading, she has this incredible voice about her that I think really carries the book. And that's something that everyone who's read it that I've given it to so far just can't stop talking about this incredible voice that's so propulsive. And I wondered if you might talk a little bit about that voice, where it comes from within you. Is it sort of part of where you're from, both geographically, but also it's sort of a familial voice? And also, I remember once Gordon Lish said in an interview, you have to speak with the loudest voice. And he said, not in terms of decibels, meaning you don't have to shout, but if you're a writer, you have to speak with the loudest voice, meaning write something that's so authentic. He said something about putting your stink on the page, and that's how you know that there's good writing. And I just felt like, yes, like
I love him.
she put her stink on the page. So yeah, talk about style, my dear.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is from Boston and my family. I think the voice is the voice of my dad a lot. When I hear him, he talked with me. I mean, he's talked at me my entire life, and I, as his best friend, have listened to him talk for my entire life. So I have his voice in my head already, and it is very much a Boston voice, which I think of as a very kind of punchy and dynamic and a lot of short, intentional language and like sometimes menacing. The things that I think made my family's speech like stick into my own head even after we left Boston. Also, they were always around. But then when we got to, the royal we of me, got to New York and took the class with Gordon. I was living with Lily at the time there when we were in Gordon's class. He was such he's such an advocate of the personal voice, but he has such a reputation for being a brutal editor. But he never did that to me. I never found that to be the case. He was always just very supportive and telling me to go and go and go. So I think we were kind of a good match right out of the gates. I was buying what he was selling, like real hard. And I think that over the last 15 years, there's been work, because this class was in 2010, so it's been a really long time. I think there's been work in ways to distance myself from the influence of his words and the way I think. And then now, as the book has come out, it's like a kind of a homecoming with him as well, because I'm so excited to share it with him. But he taught us acoustics and like recursion and syntax and all of these stylistic approaches to the page that helped me put my stink on it. That's Gordon.
Fantastic. So one of the things that's so extraordinary about this book is it's got this amazing cast of characters, and I was lucky enough to sort of read an early iteration of this. Nicole and I have been friends for years, more on that as a sort of coda at the end of this, but she came to me with this draft that was just like brimming with voice, and you felt like you were, you both knew these characters and sort of wished you knew these characters, or you felt like you had seen them in the big screen somewhere. And I wanted to read just this tiny little passage. It's one of my favorites early on, that's both sort of about Boston, but also about Auntie Loretta. So it starts, Auntie Loretta used to take us to Star Market, a 20-minute walk down Central Street. We'd start off after she finished the various chores my grandmother assigned to fill her days. Auntie Loretta waved at the old-timers on their porches, and they called, "Say hello to your mother and father." She speculated on the quiet houses, fantastic theories in a hush. Lindsay and me, still small, were riveted. To get to the market, we had to cross Central Street, one of Somerville's major thoroughfares. Seeing my auntie stop traffic with authority made me confident in her, no matter the strange things she said about outer space. We walked into Star Market, and the cashiers and bag boys yelled, "Hello, Loretta." They flirted with her in and out the door. On the corner, we stopped by the Italian ice cart and walked home slowly and carefully with lemon and cherry dripping from our elbows. Back at Hancock Street, and this is one of my favorite scenes, Auntie Loretta gave my sister and me baths. She used a bar of soap as shampoo. There was no conditioner upstairs at my grandparents'. We sat in the tub while my aunt ran the bar back and forth across the crown of our heads. It wasn't soft, but it was love. Purposeful and cleansing. Hard, but for your own good. We winced. When we were done, Auntie sat on the toilet and held us between her thighs, running the comb between our soap-tangled hair. We never cried. She was doing us a kindness and being more careful with us than you could ever hope for anyone to be with another person. She was so full of love that she poured rough onto us. I don't even think that was her mental illness. I think that was her Treska. And there's so many of those wonderful passages where, you just have this incredible, very cinematic ability to bring these characters, to life in all of their vivacity and, for all of their strengths and weaknesses and for all of their foibles. And Auntie Loretta is of course one of my favorites, and she's both the beginning and the end of the book. I wondered if you might talk about how you thought about this characterization, and also how you decided how these characters were going to play off each other, because in the beginning it was sort of this plethora of voices, and it was really an homage to all these people that you clearly loved so much. And it took some time and distance for you to be able to sort of think about, well, what's the story here?
And some editorial insights from Dawn, my editor, who was like, you gotta put, what is the story here? So yes, I did need some distance, and I needed a little prodding in that, because I think all those characters loom so big. My family is enormous as characters, individuals. They are all full of stories and personality and, like you said, foibles and grace and all of that stuff. So I think the book started in a way as me just telling you all about them, and my editor said, where are you in the book? And you need to be in the book. You can't just be the speaker who's talking to the reader. And I think it was really interesting. I don't think I'd ever thought about where I was in my own family, how it was this act of having to write myself into my own life a little bit, and that was really weird. And I was like, oh, this might be relevant, that I'm not even in my own book. And that was, I'm in therapy, so that was, I brought that up. I was like,
that may be a recurring
I was like, I had a realization, and the book was very much a part of that. So I think that was sort of the editorial thrust, to make it about me and how all the way these characters played off each other ended up being how they affected me and my front moving story. So as my story in the present, or the close present, progressed, events that related to that were where I could bring in these stories from my family. So I think that also allowed them to be a lot more potent, because then they were playing off of things that were happening in my own life. And how I conceived of Loretta, my auntie was a paranoid schizophrenic. She had a psychosis. She was, if there was a diagnosis, she had that diagnosis. She lived in my grandparents' house in Somerville till they died, and then she was institutionalized. She had a life that was, I think, very familiar to a lot of Boston families. I think there are a lot of aunts and uncles and siblings that are mentally ill and live at home and don't really have a life of their own. And then she spent 40 years institutionalized, and I think that made me so sad that I wanted to kind of resurrect her.
It's amazing that you say that, because she sticks out in the book to me as a reader who didn't meet her. as an incredibly independent, vivacious, I mean, certainly like creative, shall we say, woman, you know, but that the way she comes across to the readers is somebody that was actually really a role model for you in a lot of ways. And like you say in that passage that, you know, it was rough, but it was love and nobody could have cared more. So you did that.
It keeps coming up that Auntie Loretta was a role model, and she was, but I guess I never thought of that, because she was like, I saw her more as like a companion of ours, which is also, I think, as a child, why she seemed in my rendering so dynamic, is I was trying to write her from what I remembered from her as a kid, which was like, she was fun and funny and crazy, but then she would like leave the gas on and go take a nap, and like the first thing she did after a nap was like light a cigarette. So it was like there were just moments where it was like she was a wonderful person, but she almost blew the house up. Like, and so I think I think that's where like Fire and Flames is really important. I have gifts for everybody. I made these little matchbooks.
Oh, how great.
Sorry,
Wow.
Stream. I'll leave some with Jeff at the store. But I was trying to think about the book and what the book means, and I was like, I think that so much of the book is about the way things have burned down.
Yeah.
Like literally and figuratively, and then also been built back, and that's Boston as well. That's my family. My family has been incredibly resilient in the face of the shit that they have endured, and then they just keep building home again and again and again. So I think that, you know, the flames are bad and good.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, so it's funny you should say that. I marked this passage where you said, before I moved to New York, my childhood friend Ashley and I stood on her porch in Denver. Whenever the wind picked up, her begonias shed petals that shuttled across the lawn. You think you're going to save the world? She asked, not looking at me. I need to save myself, I said, and it was true. And I think that, to me, that's one of those universal sort of themes that, you know, as we were talking about the book. So originally, when we were sort of going back and forth about titles, we knew Wonderland was always going to be the headliner, and I think it's so brilliant. But when we were talking about subtitles, A Tale of Hustling Hard and Breaking Even, there was like a lot of discussion about whether or not to bring Boston, literally the moniker, you know, the proper noun, into the title, because it is a Boston story. But I think what Yadon and your editorial team and you know, I remember us having a lot of discussions about it, was realizing that it's a story that sort of transcends place in a lot of ways. You know, it transcends social class in that it's a story about really what does it mean to sort of, for anyone to come from a place, you know, a city, a family where you both love that place and that family, and then leave that place and that family, and then, you know, sort of transcend it, and then need to come back in some ways. And it was really profound for me to read this passage about needing to save yourself, because that was not in the original draft, and I felt like, okay, she found the answer in this book.
I mean, maybe,
you're done with therapy.
Yeah,
you can stop
I'm
writing
done.
those checks now.
So much money. I'm sorry, baby.
And so one of the bigger themes that I've always loved about this book, and sort of this story that unites Nicole and I together in a lot of ways, is really a story about social class, and an origin story about sort of how we first came together. I think a lot of what Wonderland is looking at is how do you use the architecture of a place, in this case literally, you know, the neighborhoods where you grew up, and Boston as a sort of city that looms larger than life, with like the mob influence and the mafia, which touches your family, but you know, how, what does it mean to transcend social class, and then sort of come back to like thinking about early drafts of your bio where we were saying, well, first in our family to go to college, right? And there was those sort of sections where you were writing about like, that I loved so much, where you were writing about, you know, people in college that we would both encounter, you know, and sort of like learning these like put on sort of affectations of people that were so sort of expectant of being part of this class, and thinking how much that reflects back on how we met. So part of our stories is also about the social class of being an artist and a writer, and what does it mean to try to survive and make money. And you talk about that in Wonderland, where Nicole talks about putting her apartment on Airbnb in Harlem and renting it out as a way of making money, while also being an adjunct teacher and writing. And I was lucky enough to be one of her early couch surfer guest. This is how we met. I was renting Nicole's couch for $30 a night while teaching at Columbia University, may I add, which was only a stone's throw
I
away.
add the $30 a night was forced upon me. I tried
made
to
her
give
take
the couch.
$30 a night from me and let me take her out to dinner on the last night that she had me. I wasn't even the one that got the Airbnb room. There was a full-time resident in that room. So I had to wait till he got out of the shower to get my shower before I went to go teach at Columbia University. And so, you know, I say that in sort of all seriousness in terms of, like, I think this is a really profound story also about what does it mean to be a young writer living in New York, trying to make it work, trying to pay rent in an apartment that, you know, where in Harlem where the rent's going up and the landlord's trying to push you out. And that was something that I witnessed in the moment. So I wondered if you could talk about that.
Yeah. I want to start with transcending class because it's something that comes up quite a bit and I don't think I have. Like, I don't think you can. There's a scene in maybe the first book of the Ferrante series where the character from Naples is watching a girl on the other side of the tunnel that has all this money in the world, and she just realizes, like, no matter what I do, I'll never be able to be that girl. Like, I will never have the sort of class that was born into this woman that she saw, and that struck me when I read that so much because I know that feeling. I feel like, I feel like last night we were talking about class, and I said, you know, I was the first one in my family to graduate college, and I'm the only one. The other 3 siblings of mine are still working, you know, as in city jobs, firefighters, home health aides, like the same sort of work that we did generationally for years and years. And I think that class, you know, we did move from a lower middle class to a middle class life. That's absolutely true. By the time that I was in high school and college, you know, I had access to my lovely friends here who went to wonderful private schools and are pilots and teachers and all of these people I never would have encountered in my life otherwise. So I think that is one really material value of the shift from growing up in East Boston to growing up in Denver, Honolulu. I was around kids who had much more than I had in terms of wealth, but also in terms of access and what they had done and could do. So that was always really aspirational for me. So I think that really helped. But I look back and I'm like, I don't know, a bunch of people in my immediate family still went to jail. You know, there hasn't been this sort of like, oh, now everything's cool. Like that takes a really long time. So I do think that, and I think that shows up in cities like New York, where, you know, I would go out with my friends who had come from a much better circumstance, and they'd be at the bar and I'd be behind the bar, like still working, right? And they were drinking at my bar. So I would even think in moments like that, like, oh, we're not the same. Like, they're having a great time and I'm here till 2 a.m. And I think that those aspects of being working class will never, and then adjuncting for 15 years in the situation we were in. And so it's like, I look at all of that and I'm like, I didn't move class that much. I just work harder to like cling on to this sense of that better life that I think my mother made such enormous efforts to provide for us, right? Like, so it's like, and I've done that. Things are much better for me now, I think. And my sister has a wonderful career as a firefighter, and I think that, you know, her kids are going to be in a better position than we. So it's like, it does work, but I just don't think it works as quickly as one would like, maybe.
Love that answer. To be continued. So one of the other things that I love about this book that I've always loved is it's so much a book about strong women. You know, you just talked about your mom, who I got to meet at your wedding. And I think, you know, she's one of the influential characters that sort of was like, hey, look, I'm going to, like, you and your sister were born in this place, but I'm going to pull you out of this place and I'm going to go marry a guy who's in the military and we're going to like travel the US and, you know, I'm going to lift us up by our bootstraps and get my girls out of here. And, but there's so many other women in the book too. There's this sort of like coterie of, you know, friends of your mom's. And there's this awesome paragraph where you say, my mother, Henball, who's also one of my favorite characters, Debbie and Haha, Women formed my life with their pillbox hats and fishnet stockings, their shoulder pads and hairspray. There was nothing godly or neat about them. They were the women whose authority and confidence would drive my own. They cut the air and seduced it and left every room bleeding and charmed. And Lord, were they loud, each a holy organ with magnificent range. And I just think like that couldn't be a better description of you also. And you as a person and you as a writer. And I loved the women that people this book, when I pitched it originally, I was always so focused on the father saying like, he's the Jack Nicholson, I was like, okay, Jack Nicholson will play him, it'll be amazing. And I love Phil Treska, having met him in life now, but
he's
really
hoping for Ben Affleck. That's what he wants everybody to know.
I'll work on that one.
Yeah.
But it's really a book about the strength of women,
Totally.
pulling each other up and, raising kids and getting jobs and leaving marriages and moving on and, saving drunks and covering up murders and, all sorts of things that just women do. Another amazing line, and this was one that I think I quoted early on when I was pitching it around, was Nicole's mom writes in her baby book, right? In pencil, your dad stole money from your christening. I'm writing this in pencil so I can erase it when he returns it, and it never gets erased. And that was like, that was the, I'm thinking like, this is the story of this woman. This is the story of generations of women in this book. And I the minute I was telling editors that story, they were like, I have to read this. And so I was thinking, who are, tell us about these women and how they people the book, and if that your perception, because for you it was a book about your dad when it began, and I know you love him and I love him too, but it's really, now reading it, it's really become a story about how women save the world.
Yeah, I think that my mother's girlfriends, she has no sisters, so these were all I call them my East Boston anchor aunties, because they all dated my uncles and then stuck around after they broke up. So we have this series of aunties in my life that were East Boston in the 80s, they were gorgeous and they were loud, which is just what I just wrote. And I was obsessed with them. I was obsessed with them as a little girl, and they smoked and they swore and they were drinking all the time. And I realized to some extent that was probably maybe a rough place to be as a kid, and maybe not the most healthy environment in a lot of ways, but it was the only place we were from, and it's the only way that people were. So I think that they were this range of women that each had such a different sort of strength. And my auntie Henball and Haha are thus named for their laughs. Everybody was a henball. My Uncle Bone is also, he was an honorary henball. And so if you're acting like a henball, you get to be a henball. And then Haha, she had a big Haha laugh. And one was my godmother, and I wish the other was my godmother. And I love them both so much. And I think that, Haha, I just found out she died, calling to tell her to come and see me in Boston. I didn't know. I talked to her maybe 6 or 7 months ago, and I kept calling and nobody was answering. And that's been a real sad thing. But I also think she got me here, right? And I think that is what they meant to me, was that they were, they drove my sense of self, and they kind of encouraged or allowed me to be, my ridiculous self. Yeah. And also very cool. They were the coolest.
They sound like the coolest. I'm like, you had an aunt that was a Jordache model?
That was Haha. Haha was gorgeous. She was gorgeous. She was a runway model and a Jordache model and a Faded Glory model. She was on billboards. My dad was like, I just turned the corner and they're there to be Haha, in the middle of Davis. She was everywhere. So I think that she was someone that I always wanted to be as elegant and cool as.
But then you just exceeded her in
Never.
elegance.
I'm like, no, I learned a lot from her, but I can't pull off gloves up to here, and she always had on gloves up to here.
Well, my final question, so I'm going to bring it full circle back to Phil.
Yes, ma'am.
So Phil Treska is a larger-than-life human being, and the father in the story. And this book was written very much as sort of, I think, a love letter to him, really, to begin with. And that was sort of how Nicole's editor, Yadon, sort of brilliantly, I think, phrased it in the beginning, was like, we love your dad, but also where are you in the story? There's this great passage at the end where you actually talk about your process of interviewing Phil. And you said, whenever Phil and I got together, we drank wine and cried over everything. His sick sister, my sick auntie, and the anguish. His time in the war and the anguish. The mob and its ways, which were not glamorous. I asked questions into the blurry night and filled up notebooks of quotes and names I'd heard before and I'd hear again. He answered my questions the way he always did. Incomplete, the way he wanted to tell it, and I took my notes the way I always did. Incomplete, catching the bits I wanted to know. That sounds terrible, Pops. Yeah, he said, had it been a conversation, or we were reuniting, that would have been different, but it wasn't like that. I'm glad I'm here to talk about it with you. I'm glad too. Maybe we can talk about it while I'm here, if that's okay. I know you can carry it all. I wanted to carry it all because if I didn't, I'd lose sight of it, and anyone will tell you if you take your eye off the ball, it bounces, it breaks. And I think that's so beautiful because to me, this really, I know at its core really is sort of a testament to the generations of Treskas who you pay homage to here, but also to this incredible relationship of forgiveness that you have with your dad. And I wondered if you wanted to talk at all about that process, those hours of interviews, because what's interesting is none of them, make their way explicitly into this book, but
they do. They do
weight.
in a lot of the narrative from Phil, right? A lot of the stories he told me in the interview process became the language in the scenes about those moments. I could just sort of then take that and use it. So he did really inform the book so much, but just to that passage, I also put that in there because it's a memoir and it's not exact from his telling to mine, and it's not exact in my telling to you. And I understand that, my sister and my mother and my brother and my father all have different memories of the same memory, right? And that we all have different relationships with different people in our family. So like, my sister has a much harder relationship with my dad than I do, and she doesn't understand our closeness. And I'm like, well, but that's how families work, right? There are children that get along with each other or with parents differently. So I think putting a kind of a little cover your ass caveat in there, which was to say, I'm writing what Phil told me from what he wanted to say, and then I'm writing that from what I remember and wrote down about what I want to say, because there are these sort of gaps in both memory and perception. So I think that's important. But my dad, I think the reason that we are so close, I think we've always been very close, but I think as we've gotten older, and I think what has led into the forgiveness, the ease of forgiveness for the things that my dad did as a younger, wilder, drunker, PTSD, abusive, ankle gun kind of guy, was that he has worked so hard to change throughout his life. And I think that a lot of people, and especially a lot of people in the places that we come from, their lives can get a lot smaller. Yeah. And I think my dad has been someone who has worked really hard to expand his world, and that is crazy to me. Like, he's like, oh, was I not great as a dad? Let me try and do better as a grandfather and be a better father then. And he got on antidepressants in his 70s. That's insane to me. I'm like, and it's amazing. And he's like, I feel so much better. And I'm like, who is still working that hard to be kind of a better version of themselves? I find it really inspiring and really optimistic that you can be always evolving, if that's, and it's like, it's not been evolving into careers or evolving in these ways where we may think like socially that's important. It's been like as an individual, and his views and the way he thinks about the world and people have changed so much over time. So I'm proud of him.
Love it.
He's a mensch.
All right, I have two quick fire questions for you. Best John Prine lyric.
Oh, it was the one that was going to be the, what was it? I'm an old, wait, what was it? My father is an old man grown old. Yeah. What was the beginning of it?
I saw a really good one about America recently that was like, I love America, but I just don't know how to get there anymore. And
That's
it made
a
me
good
think
one.
of that.
There's the Angel from Montgomery line was the header for the book for a really long time, which is like, oh, my old man is another child grown old. That was the line.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's maybe my favorite.
Yeah,
Right.
I love that too.
Took me by surprise.
It'll
I
still
knew
always be the like beginning of this.
But the beginning of this now is
It's awesome.
Louise Gluck's Telemachus's Detachment, which is a fantastic poem, and I got her approval like 3 weeks before she passed, so it felt like she really anointed the book.
And final quick question is, what's your Dunkin' Donuts order?
It is like a large regular. Like, what other order is there? I got one today and I got one for James.
That is all, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. And please buy this amazing book. We will not put it down.
Does anybody else, do you
Audience questions,
Audience
yeah.
questions.
Absolutely have time because we
Great.
started a little bit later, so we got some time. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions from-
I have one.
Could you repeat the question?
I was witnessing his process as a writer when she wrote a novel, and I know that she was making an effort to read certain things to stay grounded, or maybe for voice, or were you reading or watching or even listening to certain things when you wrote that novel?
Yeah, thank you, Jerome. The question was that when writers are working, they're often reading and listening and kind of thinking about other things and what were those things for the book. Yeah, I was. I read a lot of Boston Globe archives, which are obviously just research, but also there's a book called Finding Wonderland, which was written like in the 50s about the park 100 years. Do you know about it? Oh, I was like, I bought it off eBay. It was like a one-off. I was like, this is gold. So I think some of the research books were really important, but also I read Easy Beauty by Chloe Cooper Jones and Stay True by Hua Su, and some other like contemporary memoirs that I felt like I wanted to see how they were handling time and some of the concepts that were feeling like elusive about plot for me. And then I listened to a lot of Ani DeFranco. A lot.
Shocker.
Yeah, like so much. I would just cry and like walk down Central Park and cry, and then I would go home and work again. Yeah, amongst other people, but that was a very present experience. Yes.
How long did it take you to write the book?
How long did it take to write the book? I think that's like two questions. The first was part of my graduate thesis from 2008 is in the book. Short stories I wrote in 2015, I realized in editing like the Florida chapter, that was like a full short story that I hadn't published that I ended up putting in the book. But this draft started in 2020. And Annie actually, post couch days, once she was an agent, she said, why don't you just write 20 stories that you've told me about your family, and like we'll start with that. And that was
I think I said that when I was still on your couch.
Yeah, it's true.
Probably many late night sessions of like these need to be.
But that was like the actual assignment that led, like an assignment, because I really couldn't figure out how to tell this story, and I think that's why it started in 2008, and it took so long. I tried it as short stories, I tried it as a novel, like thinking about my dad as the central character. So I spent a decade trying to Rubik's Cube this family thing, and I think your prompt of just tell me the crazy things you tell me at dinner, and that was the draft that you sold. That was like the first draft sold. You're so good at your job.
How did your family members react.
Yeah, yeah. How did the family react? How has the family?
That's
Are they?
that's an online question too, so you got
it's
that.
evolving.
I feel like that is a lot. That is a live question. I don't know. I mean, I know in ways. I know my father has said, I know there are things in here that I'm going to disagree with, and I'm not going to like. But I know you told the truth, and I love you, so I hope it does well. He's lovely. My mom is like, what'd you put in there? What do you know about Boston? and it's been a much more, I'm scared. I'm like, she's not keen, but she's also much more, I think, invested in sort of like the ethos of the mafia world and not talking about anything and not doing like Uncle Tom is her husband now. And I think that has sort of kept her a little bit reticent about me doing any of this. Yeah. Which I understand, but also, I didn't do anything crazy. I'm not stupid.
Okay.
So we have two questions. Well, one from the live stream,
Yes.
but I'll ask mine. I have my.
Yes.
So, all these years later, can you each of you tell us about your current couch, and how it compared to that one?
Current couch.
My husband just was like, oh, Jesus Christ. The current couch, that is such a good question, Jeff. The current couch came from the Facebook free group because you never get rid of the hustle. I need things for free, and I am the Facebook free group queen in my neighborhood. Our entire house is so fancy now because of our rich neighbors who I have just pilfered all of their stuff. So there was a guy who was leaving, and he was going to put his like $2,500 leather couch on the street because the sale fell through. So I hired a Ukrainian widow to get a van, and we went and got it and jammed it through the door. It's beautiful. It's brown leather. It's magnificent.
Wonderful.
Yeah. How's your couch?
I sold my most recent.
Yeah. You don't have one again?
I've been so good at selling things lately.
Somebody's going to be visiting you.
I know. Here she comes
And
again.
then the new couch that I have actually just came with the place, and I love it.
Oh, okay.
So I'm
Good.
unattached.
We're cool. Couch situation.
Wonderful.
Very good question.
Well, the live stream question for Agent Annie was, how do we reach Agent Annie?
You are very welcome to email me. It's Annie@theshipmanagency.com. And the Shipment Agency has a fantastic website, and have to say is a really great agency that's founded by Leslie Shipman.
She's incredible.
She's one of the most preeminent speakers agent in New York, and I got so lucky to be able to have my umbrella under hers. So do check it out, and all props to her for sure.
Wonderful.
Anything else before we wrap up? Yes. Hey, Courtney.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Glad you're here.
I was going to tell you, I definitely, hi everybody on the camera. I put this event in my calendar starting at 7 p.m.
Girl, I did too. I was asleep at 5:45.
Sent you the links.
I know.
It's all over the web.
I got here. I'm just right up the street.
Agent Annie is also the alarm clock.
Yeah.
Yes, so I always like to ask writers about their self-care practice, like while you're kind of diving into this stuff. What did that look like for you?
I mean, I think it was the Ani and the crying on Fifth
That's
Avenue.
what I was going to ask if it was, okay.
It was like I really did because it's a really good question, Courtney, because I feel like, my uncle Dennis, this is his. Look at this gold chain. This is with this cross, and then there's a bag of money, a gold bag. Consequently, he died in this. He overdosed of heroin in 1984, and I was a really little kid, but I learned it was a secret. Everything in the family, it was a shameful thing that he had overdosed, so nobody talked about it. And I always grew up not knowing much about his life and death because I had only been 5 when he passed away, and I knew him, but I was a kid. So I read a lot in the Globe. They sent me all of the articles of he robbed Cumberland Farms in Belmont and led the police on a 3-town chase through Watertown and Belmont, and I can't remember the third one now. Charlestown. It's Charlestown. I know. And back again. And at the end of that, he ended up rushing through a barricade of police cars. They opened fire on the car and they killed the kid that was riding with him. They shot into the car, and so he went to prison for 10 years and got out after 5 and died within just 2 years or so after that. And he was 24 when it happened. And so I found out all of this stuff, and I had this real grief, this traumatic grief for him, and not only for him and the details of what had happened, but how young he was. And like, I teach college. My students are 22, 23 years old, and they're babies to me. The idea that this kid did this terrible, stupid thing on drugs did not change that my heart broke for him, and that he was stupid and he was mentally ill, and like these and all of these sorts of things that I think if we weren't so secretive, we would have been able to deal with a little bit better. So I needed some self-care because it was just really heavy. It was like a lot of heavy family stuff, and I didn't really get enough. I'll say that. So I do think that after, because it's you don't have time, right? It's like the book is coming and you're working, and then it's like, so I think after this, I will probably go lie somewhere for a long time and just lie there and be like, and then someone's gonna be like, so what are you working on? I'm gonna have to get back to work.
Hey, Annie's got another alarm.
Yeah, it's true.
It already went off.
Where are you headed next?
I am going to Mystic, Connecticut next,
Nice.
and then we are going to Madison, Connecticut, and then we're doing events in New York on the 18th and 22nd, and then Denver, and then Portland, Oregon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Coast to coast.
Let's say a real shout out, I gotta say, to Simon & Schuster who brought this out, to
Yeah.
Yvonne Israel and the entire team there. They really absolutely rolled out the red carpet for Nicole, and I just am so thankful that she got what she deserved. So in this day and age, it's really rare to have a many city book tour, and we're so lucky to get you in person.
And I am so lucky and grateful that you're all here. It has like been the most heart-expanding thing to engage with readers, and I'm like, it's so different than engaging with writers. So it's been just a joy to be at bookstores and in libraries and with readers. So thank you for coming.
Can I ask you one other thing?
Yeah.
Who decided, and how was the cover chosen?
I decided.
You decided.
And
Great.
And I really wanted to, but I will say that Simon & Schuster took the ball and ran with it,
Yeah.
where I gave them, I decided a couple of different ways that I would have liked the book to look, but my family has like albums upon albums, and I was the first grandbaby, so like my grandma went nuts. I have like a baby book like this that I found this when Yadon called and asked, you want to look for a photo of you that evokes place as well, because I had another photo that he didn't think showed Boston enough, and this is like the backyard in Somerville, and it's clearly the 4th of July, and it's just a very, to me, perfect. And this is I would like just to point out Uncle Mark Suchiko's thigh. I suspect will sell a number of books.
It already has in Provincetown.
Yeah, there you go. So I am hopeful that, and had a very handsome face that the editor wouldn't let me put on. I said, Mark's face is in the picture if you just move it over. And he was like, I think it'll be too distracting. Super
Wow.
big.
That's pretty amazing, because it's rare that authors get much input, if any, on the
Yes.
book cover usually.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
They've
That's
been
great.
They've been amazing.
really warmly receptive to my ideas. I have not had to fight, and if I have, Annie's done it. And then just very quickly, this is my first bike. It's on Hancock Street. I didn't know this was actually all Simon & Schuster. They pulled one of these pics and put it on the back, and I just love them. I'm like, bye guys.
I love that too.
Thanks for coming
Yeah.
by.
That's beautiful.
So it's very much an album of my life. There are photos in each chapter has a photo ahead of it, and I feel like it is the book of my whole life, and it feels very, very special to me.
Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody.
You all for being here.
Thank you.